Welcome to the Sutton Group webinar. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys in Sutton Real Estate. Working with a lot of your companies. It's just a pleasure to be here. I know we got a lot to cover today, so if you don't mind, I'll just jump in and we can just start the webinar off. I want to tell you that we are, like all places, I think, we're kind of in a low supply market, right? And when we're in a low supply market, what you're dealing with is listing presentations become super critically important. And I look at them like the apex point of our, of our marketing strategy. I mean, what our whole marketing strategy is centered around is trying to get to the top of the pyramid so we can get to that place where we can talk to a seller about potentially listing their house. And I want to tell you a quick story about this, and it's related to listing presentations. My wife and I went to Hawaii last year, and we happened to go to the Dole plantation where you get most of the pineapples, at least in the United States. And there was a gal there, and she was doing a demonstration of how to properly cut a pineapple. And she did such an amazing job. She had a knife and she was slicing and dicing and telling jokes, and it was just had the whole group of 50 of us laughing and having fun and giving out samples and flipping things. It was just an incredible presentation. So we get done and we then get on a train. We take a tour of the plantation. And by the way, that presentation took about 15 minutes. When we came back around, I could hear her talking again. So I walked over and she had another 50 people around her, and she was doing exactly the same presentation, same jokes, same knife throwing, everything was exactly the same. And you know what? The crowd was mesmerized. They didn't care. What they loved about it was that she knew her presentation cold and she was an absolute master. So the question we're going to get into first is, do you feel like you have complete mastery over your listing presentation? Or do you feel nervous? Do you feel unsettled about your presentation when you walk into a listing? We want to help you get past that today with our presentation, because presentation, in my opinion, is the key to performance. When you have a great presentation, it'll unlock your performance to a whole nother level. So we're gonna move fast, and I tend to talk a little bit fast, so I apologize. I know we're recording this, so you can come back and review it. I am going to give you a copy of all my slides, so I'll send that to Maria and she can disseminate that out to all of you. So don't feel like you got to write everything down that's on every slide. But I want to start talking about presentation from a perspective of personality versus presentation for a second. A few of you have gotten into a bad habit, and there's a lot of people that are guilty of this, so it's not just you, but that come into a presentation situation and think that they're going to win just on personality. In other words, they're going to say to themselves, I've got a great personality. I can just win these people over with the sheer force of will because they're going to like me. They're going to love me. They're going to think I'm so amazing as a human being, right? But that doesn't cut it. Let me tell you why. I went to high school with a guy, football star, incredible guy, incredible personality. Everybody loved to be around this guy. And he opened, and now I'm old, guys, so I'm 52. Back when we graduated high school, and now that's not old, by the way, but he opened a video store. And it was the hometown video store. We'd all go in there. He would call us by name. Jim, I got a great movie for you, buddy. Come over here. I'm going to show it to you. This is what you got to watch. I know you haven't seen it. That's all. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. Everybody loved Jack. Everybody loved him. The wives would come in and he'd have a perfect movie for them. The kids would come in, hey, I got a great movie for you guys. No, you haven't seen this one yet. But what happened over time, even though he had an amazing personality, was that a competitor came to the market. Blockbuster Video came to market, right? Blockbuster put him out of business really rapidly. Within 2 years, he was done. But then what replaced Blockbuster? Now we got Netflix, right? And all the other streaming services. What the end of the result of this and the lesson of this is personality only takes you so far. What will win is highest value for dollar spent. Now for $12 a month, I have access to tens of thousands of movies, right, on Netflix. It's just amazing. So personality can't solve all your problems. Just like in a professional situation, we can't just rely on personality. We have to deliver an amazing presentation that beats the competition. I want to ask yourself, are you doing that now? Are you coming in and delivering amazing value? Are people super impressed by what you're presenting to them? Because if they're not, you could be losing, right? So there's several layers to this. We're going to start with the foundational layer. And that is the first moment you have a meeting with someone. The first time you meet them, you have to hit this first impression standard, which is what I call the 2X standard. You have 2 seconds to make a great first impression. You have 2 minutes to make a lasting impression. Did you hear what I said? 2 seconds, first impression, 2 minutes for a lasting impression. So in that 2-second period, the university studies show that here's what's going to impact that the most. Number one, it's going to be your visual appearance. There's been a terrible trend in our industry to start dressing down. And when we start to dress down, what happens is people don't take you as seriously. Can reverse that a little bit and think about when you dress up. When you dress up, you're going to go on a date. You're going to go to a nice dinner. You're going to go, to a show, and you get dressed up. How do you feel? You feel like $1 million. You act differently when you're dressed up, right? And the clients look at you differently when you're dressed up. Imagine going to your attorney or a new doctor, and they meet you and they're wearing like an AC/DC shirt and sweatpants. How would you feel about that? You'd be like, this guy's not professional. This gal's not professional. I'm not going to trust them. When we dress up, we look at our best, we automatically have some credibility that comes with that. Even if it's not earned yet, you still have some credibility when you look good. I want you to ask yourself, at your last listing presentation, did you look your absolute best when you walked through that door, or did you just kind of walk in casually? The argument is, my clients are casual, so I want to be casual. That's not an excuse. Your clients want you to look the part, okay? 38%, so that's 55% visual appearance, 38% is voice quality, 7% is content, okay? So when we talk about those issues, 38% voice quality, notice it's the inflection of my voice. It's the tone of my voice. It's the commitment to the material that they can hear in my voice. 2% is, or 7% is the content. Doesn't mean content doesn't matter, but the way you look and the way you sound matters more in that first impression start place. So when you come in, do you look confident? Do you feel confident? Is it translating to your audience? Because that's going to make a big decision about whether they're going to hire you or not. You can lose them before you even gain their trust, right? So that first impression window. But when we're talking about this first impression window, we get past that first 2-minute period. We've had a great first impression, right? We've kind of impressed them a little bit about how we are coming across. Now we got to come across and really start to deliver some information. And how do we deliver the information is super important, because information can be delivered in ways that are boring, and information can be delivered in ways that is riveting. I'm going to give you an example. My wife and I went to my little cousin. She graduated high school a couple of years ago, and she's an incredible student. She's a 4.0 student, but she went to high school in Washington State, and the high school that she went to had 25 valedictorians. Can you imagine that? 25 people with a 4.0 or better score. So, she wasn't the top of the leaderboard. So there was somebody else that gave the commencement speech. And it was also another very high ranking valedictorian. Now we're in an auditorium. This high school is so big, it holds 2,000 people. We're all listening. And there's been a lot of speeches. People are kind of bored. People are pretty restless. We're on our phones. We're not really paying a lot of attention. We're just kind of getting through the day, as you normally do through these things. But this young lady came up to the stage and she started her speech, and it was a totally different tone of voice. It was a confident, she looked good, she looked the part, but then she started to speak, and her content was delivered with such confidence, such grace, such confidence, that we all became immediately riveted. And what she said was, she said, never would I imagine that my mom would be able to work 2 jobs to put food on our table and pay the rent as a single mom through my entire high school career. Never would I imagine that I would grow up and be heading off to college. Never would I imagine that I could keep a full-time job myself going through high school, but here I'm going off to college. And she continued on that track, and she told her mom's story. She told their story of how they had to recover from a single dad, their dad leaving them, and that single mom raising her. And it was absolutely riveting. We were all on the edge of our seats by the time she was done with that story. Why? Because she had absolute confidence, absolute grace, absolutely felt amazing in that moment. And she got a standing ovation. So when we think about this is really the art of influence. If you are taking a note, that's something to write down. The art of influence. The art of influence is powerful. There's a great quote here by Blake Lively, who's married to a Canadian, by the way. The most beautiful thing you can wear is confidence, right? Do you think people can sense confidence when you're walking through the front door of that listing appointment? Do they see it on your face? Or are you walking in a little bit not confident? Now, let me tell you what builds confidence. For those of you that are a little bit shaking in your boots and you say, you know what, Jim, to be truly honest with you, I feel like I'm the emperor with no clothes on. You've heard that term. Like, I feel like I've sold $10 million last year, but I still feel like I don't really know what I'm doing. I sold 20 homes last year, but I was all kind of blind luck. I don't really know what I'm doing still. I feel completely like I am the person walking in there. I don't have the complete confidence that I know I should. What will build that confidence? What builds that confidence is this first word here, competence. Competence equals confidence. So the way you build your confidence isn't through faking it till you make it. It's by becoming absolutely competent and the expert in what you're talking about. So this is going to come through practice, study, and becoming an absolute student of your profession. Think about yourself. If we all walked out the door, and I don't want you to do that because I want you to finish the presentation with me, but if you walked out the door and you looked up in the sky, and the sky we all know is blue, but I said to you, it's pink. And I said, it's pink. You would say back to me, no, it's not, Jim. The sky is blue. And I'd say, no, it's pink. No, it's blue. Why would you have such confidence? Because you know with absolute clarity what you're talking about. The same is true of a surgeon who's operating on you. The same is true as the best accountants, the best attorneys, the highest paid professionals in your market area, the people that are making $500,000, $1 million a year. The reason why they're able to make that kind of money is because they have absolute competence, which creates absolute confidence, which translates to the people that they're serving. People can see it, they can feel it, it's visceral. So that's where you got to get to when you become a top agent at the top of your game. Now, I will say that there's something called the 10,000 hour rule. If you haven't read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, I'm going to recommend you do that. Malcolm Gladwell is an excellent author, but he talks about studying the masters of professions across the world. And what you find is that the masters of anything, sports, athletic sports, business, musical instruments or bands, they all have this commonality of the 10,000 hour rule. They practice their profession, their expertise, 10,000 hours, which creates a mastery in their business. I want you to go back. I want you to think about and be honest with yourself. Since we've been in the market now in 2022, about 6 months, right? So in the first 6 months of this year, how many hours have you spent practicing your listing presentation? Have you spent an hour practicing your listing presentation? Have you spent 10 hours practicing your listing presentation? Have you spent 100 hours practicing listing presentation? The most important element of your real estate business, the one that drives the most profit to your bottom line, have you absolutely done this? Have you spent any time at all in that mastery process, which leads, by the way, to competence, which leads, by the way, to confidence, which leads you to becoming a much, much better agent than you are now. So let's walk through some ways that we can improve, okay? So one thing, we've heard this statement before by Zig Ziglar, but it's a great one. He says, success occurs when opportunity meets preparation, kind of this competence issue we've been talking about. But I want you to think about this. When I get a listing appointment, when I have one in hand, what's my next step to prepare for this appointment? Do I just kind of wing it, bring a yellow legal pad and hope for the best when I get there, which is what a lot of agents do? Or do I have a 10-step plan where I'm going to say, here's all the things that I need to know coming into that appointment, all the things I need to do before I arrive at that seller's door, because I want to be the expert in the room when I arrive. I don't want that seller to know more than I do. By the way, sellers have access to more information than they've ever had in their lives. They can research in depth through the internet a lot of things. We don't want to walk in and have them being smarter than us ever. So what are we looking at? We're going through the ownership records, the tax records, the mortgage records, the last sale when they purchased the property, the last listing agent who had the property, right? Listings in the neighborhood, of course, plat maps, aerial maps, trend lines for the neighborhood. We're looking up the client, Googling them, Facebook, LinkedIn, learning more about them, looking at our marketing materials, making sure those are up to date. Of course, doing a CMA before we arrive, making sure our listing documents are prepared. What is our checklist for getting ready? Now, my team has created what we call a pre-listing checklist that we give to all of our agents to help us stay at the top of our game. Remember, my company is selling at $1.4 billion in real estate. We did that last year in a population base of 80,000. We're not in LA. We're not in New York. We're not in Atlanta. We're in a tiny little town. We're selling $1.4 billion of real estate. How do we do it? By coming in prepared. So when we get that call, hey, come and talk to me about listing my house, we have a pre-listing checklist. Okay, what do we got to do? First thing, I'm going to research the client. Social media, Google, referral information. I'm going to research the neighborhood. I'm going to get my market materials dialed in. I'm going to research the property. I'm I'm going to do my pricing research. I'm going to do all these things to get ready, right? And then, by the way, once we list the property, we have a whole nother checklist we go through there. That's systemization. That's getting to yourself to a whole nother level in your business model. And I want to just stop for just a second there and talk about that for a second. Now, we've all seen and maybe experienced masters in other industries, right? So you think about like, and maybe you don't think this guy's a master, but he is in his own way. Maybe like an author like Stephen King, or like a Da Vinci, or somebody that's a musician that's super powerful. I was just listening to Fleetwood Mac this morning as I was working out. So when we hear these masters in their own industries and we think about them, and we think about them on a creative level, now writing or creating music is creative. We would think that that's something that can't be replicated. But when you think about this, Stephen King has written multiple bestsellers, right? You think about Fleetwood Mac put out multiple gold albums. You think about Steven Spielberg creating multiple mega blockbuster hits. How do these creative people create masterpiece after and Da Vinci, masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece after masterpiece? How do they go about this? And it's a creative thing. You think it's just like a lightning striking, but lightning striking multiple times again and again for these masters. How does it happen? It happens because their process, their system of creativity is focused, and they're following a pattern of performance. So for Stephen King, for instance, which if you haven't read his book on writing, it's really fascinating to see how he goes about writing a book. And he talks about his whole process. And for him, he gets up and he has a whole process. He goes for a walk in the morning every single day, has a, goes through this process. But one of the processes is before noon, he's written 1,000 words. And then he goes back and he does some editing in the afternoon, but that's it. 1,000 words a day creates this amazing success. These other creative people have a similar process. They're doing the same thing every day, which creates amazing, stellar, incredible performance, right? For those of you that are just winging every aspect of your business, you've got to get away from that. You got to say, I'm going to systemize, because systemization creates predictable results. That's what you have to do with your listing presentation as well. So we're going to switch gears now, and we're getting into the mechanics of presentation. What are the mechanics? Like, okay, I've followed your advice, Jim. I'm following a system, coming in prepared. I come through the front door. Now what? Now what do I do that I'm there, right? So I just want to walk you through the physical mechanics of this, especially for new agents, but even experienced agents need to understand how the flow of the meeting should go, okay? Now, and I want to tell you something. I failed miserably in my business for the first 6 months. And then I turned it around in my next 12 months, I took 150 listings. But to get 150 listings, I went on probably 300 appointments. So I learned through the school of hard knocks early in my career exactly what to do and what not to do. This is from my learning process. Number one, you have to establish your stage. What does that mean? My stage is where I'm going to come back and present to these sellers. And you are the presenter. You are the person going to come in and present to them at some point. So when I'm coming in through that front door, I'm gonna say, hey, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's my pleasure. Hey, do you mind if I just drop my stuff somewhere before we take a tour of the house? They're gonna say, sure. Where am I gonna drop that stuff? I'm gonna drop my stuff where I wanna come back. That's my stage, because that's where we're gonna circle back to. If I drop it in the wrong spot, I'm gonna come back to the wrong place. I'm generally gonna drop it on the kitchen table or maybe the kitchen island, so that will be the natural place where we're gonna come back and do the presentation. But I'm going to begin not there, but with a tour of the home. Why do I begin with a tour of the home? And by the way, my language for that is, hey, do you want to give me a chef's tour of the home? Now, I don't know what a chef's tour is. I just picked it up from some other speaker someday, at some point, and I like the sound of it. So I've always said it, give me a chef's tour of the home. So we walk through the house. And the reason why I want to do that is because people in motion, especially guys, people in motion are much more open to conversation. Guys have a hard time just sitting down and having a conversation. Gals, not so much, but guys do have a harder time with that. But when we're in motion, we feel much more comfortable. We're much more at ease. Some gals are like that too, but all of us tend to be more comfortable in motion. So as I'm walking through the house, what am I doing? I'm going to ask some W questions. Why, when, where, what? Say, why are you guys considering selling? What have you guys done since you've lived here to improve the house? Where are you guys moving to again? Okay. And so I'm going to get into these open-ended, hopefully sometimes emotionally driven questions, if I can, to kind of open them up and start to have conversation. The more free-flowing conversation I can create, my better chance of creating the key things of trust and rapport. That's my ultimate goal. Before I start any presentation, I want to check the box that I feel like I've got trust and rapport established. What happens with most real estate agents is they rush the presentation before trust and rapport has been created. When that happens, people feel like they're being sold to, and nobody likes to be sold to. Everybody likes to buy, nobody likes to be sold to. So what I need to do is make sure I have that trust, right? That rapport. Trust and rapport will be a natural thing, and you'll know you will have it when there's free flowing conversation. No stops, no gaps. It's free flowing. Hey, we're just having a conversation. We're having some fun. You're walking me through the house. I'm getting in the conversation. That's when you're going to feel that start to opening up and people start to reveal a little bit about themselves. Then as I'm walking, I'm also taking notes, detailed notes. So people show that you care and you're serious about this. And on occasion, if they're willing to, I'll say, hey, can I take a quick photo of that? That's such a cool feature. Now that doesn't apply to every house, but I may even take some photos along the way. Part of this too is what I call a vesting strategy. What's a vesting strategy? I want these people to get so vested in my relationship with them that they don't want to mess with and take the time or the energy to go talk to another agent. I want them just to only talk to me. And that is part of that process of really trying to create that relationship as early as possible, that vesting strategy. By the way, I'm always going to take more time than I think I should. Write that down if you're taking a note. Take more time than I think I should, because as realtors, we have an internal alarm clock that's clicking. It's clicking, it's ticking, 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 like, oh my gosh, I got something else to do. I got buyers I got to meet, I got offers I got to write, I got showings on those things. And you're always thinking, how soon can I get out of this meeting and on to the next meeting? You need to shut that clock down and just say to yourself, I'm going to give people the most valuable asset I have, which is my time. I'm going to spend more time than I think I should. And I'm going to invest it in this relationship. And guess what? It'll reap massive rewards for you. I guarantee you. My top agents that are doing $100 million, $50 million, $80 million in business, when they come into those meetings, everything gets shut off. The single most important thing is what's in front of you, which is that client. You need to spend all the time it takes. Now, when I'm now ready to circle back and sit down with a client and have that conversation, what am I doing? I'm going to just use these magic words. Now, here's what can happen for some of you is you can take all the time to build an amazing visual presentation. It's stunning. You've taken all this time to work on it and get it worked out. But then what happens is you get to the meeting and you don't bring it out. You just leave it in your briefcase. You don't even talk about it. So I'm going to get you past that block right now. And here's the magic word you're always going to say when you go back to home base and you're starting your presentation. I'm going to say, hey guys, do you mind if I just take a couple minutes and show you how I work? If you're taking a note, write that down. Hey guys, do you mind if I just take a couple minutes and kind of show you how I work with sellers? What are they going to say? Of course they're going to say yes. That's why you're there. Now, when you start that, then you say, well, I use a visual presentation just to keep myself on track. But this is a conversation, guys. So, let's just talk it through. Okay. Now I'm going to get into a presentation. Now, I do want to touch on this concept of a one-stage versus a two-stage presentation. Now, if any of you have been in the business, like me, I've been in the business 33 years now. Back 15, 20 years ago, it was very common to do a two-stage appointment. Two-stage appointment was we'd come out to the house, we'd take a look at it, we'd say to the sellers, hey guys, let me show you how I work. You go through your presentation, you'd say, now on the pricing side of it, now that I've seen the house, I'm going to go back to the office, I'm going to work up a CMA, and then I'll come back and we can review that and potentially talk about listing the house. And that was called a two-stage appointment. I'm going to tell you, in coaching the top industry leaders in the country today, 99% of them do not do a two-stage appointment anymore. Almost everyone has moved to a one-stage appointment. So that means when you come in there, you're loaded for bear and you're taking that listing right now. Now, why have we moved to a one-stage appointment? The number one reason is people have you included, have way more access to information than we've ever had before. We have the power to pull all those comps, do all that data research before we arrive. Now we can narrow it, we can define it while we're in the house. But the other side of that is time. Sellers and you don't have as much time, right? Time is precious and they don't want to waste time with another appointment. The third reason why we don't want to do a two-stage appointment is because between the first stage and the second stage, another realtor could come in and take your listing. So I want to try to get in there and just get that listing, okay? So most agents have moved to a one-stage appointment. So what I want to do now is I want to move up to what I call a four-step sell system or approach to the process. And this is going to be 4 layers deep, but it's kind of a process by which we live in terms of our listing presentation. So the first step in this is subconscious selling. Now, what do I mean by subconscious selling? Subconscious selling means I take 3 levels to get up to my highest mastery of my listing presentation. And before we get there, I want to tell you a little story. I did a conference. I was teaching it at a conference, and this gal was winning an award at the conference. Whoa, I lost my lights here, guys. There's live television for you. It's set. But I was presenting at a conference, and what happened was this gal was getting an award. And I went up to her after, and she had taken 20 listings in 30 days. It's amazing. It was a national conference. So I went up to her and I said, hey, Sally, congratulations. How did you do that? You're a brand new agent, by the way. Been in the business about 6 months, and she'd taken 20 listings in 30 days. And she says, well, what I do is I get on the phone every morning. I call 20 people till I set one appointment. And then I go on at least one appointment a day. And I just bring out my listing presentation, and I literally read them my script verbatim to them, with all the questions and everything, super canned. But guess what? It worked. And she took 20 listings in 30 days. Now, am I recommending that? No, I would never recommend that. But there's a lesson here. And the lesson is that having this level of subconscious selling, where you start with where she started, which was using a script, is super powerful. Okay. So I'm going to take you through 3 levels though, so you're not using a script. The first level is memorization. So memorization means that, like a doctor, like an attorney, like an accountant, the top highest paid people in your market area, they're making $500,000 to $1 million a year, the top people, do you think they have to memorize things? You better hope your doctors memorize things before he operates on you, or you're in trouble. You better hope your accountant knows the tax laws, and your attorney knows the law. You better hope that, right? So as a real estate professional, I'm going to be memorizing my script, just like an actor has to memorize his scripts. We just went and saw a play, and it was a 3-hour play, and it's amazing to me. These actors have memorized hundreds of pages of dialogue. It's absolutely incredible. And we complain about memorizing a listing presentation. Memorization is the first step, having a great script. Second step, though, is letting go of that. No, we're not going to use a script anymore. You're now going to internalize it. Internalization means this: like a football player or a golfer or basketball player, they no longer have to think about dribbling or throwing or hitting the ball. It becomes muscle memory, right? That's internalization. Now I can throw to any position on the field. I can shoot from any place on the court. I can golf from any position where my ball is lying. That's because I've learned muscle memory. Muscle memory is the same thing for us in a listing presentation. If somebody says, Jim, I don't want to talk really about, promotion. I really want to talk about the internet. You can flip over your page. No problem. Let's talk about the internet. Let's talk about that. I want to talk about social media. No problem. Let's talk about social media. I'm not going to get all goofed up and, flustered because I got to follow my exact script, right? It's because I've internalized it so well. That's having the next level, right? And the last stage is personalization. Personalization is me on the fly personalizing it to that client's unique situation. That's where I have absolute mastery of my presentation. Now, I want to ask you guys, and be honest with yourself, where are you at in this moment? Have you even got to the first base? Have you got to memorization yet? Have you made it to second base where you've internalized it? Have you made it to third base where you're personalizing on the fly to these particular clients? You want to move to mastery, you've got to progress through the 3 levels. Imagine you're going to go on Broadway. You're going to go on Broadway, you're going to be an actor, and maybe your favorite play. You think that the director would require the same exact thing? Memorization of the script, internalization, and then personalization so you can apply? Of course they would. Then the E part of that, so that's the S part. E part is exciting the client. When I'm in a presentation mode, I'm not using one thing. I'm not just using my PowerPoint presentation or my book, if I'm using a book, or my flyer, or my pamphlet. I'm using multiple things. I'm bringing out all kinds of things. I'm bringing things out of my briefcase and showing them, hey, let me show you this postcard. Let me show you this social media post. Let me show you my websites. I'm bringing things to the table. Let me show you this marketing guide that I have for you. I'm exciting the client visually with all these different tools, okay? Then I'm listening and I'm leading with the client need. I'm not going to talk about what they don't want to talk about. I want to talk about what they want to talk about. And then I'm going to laugh and have fun. If I'm not having fun with the client, I don't want to work with the client for 6 months, right? I want to have some fun. So make it light. Don't make it super serious. Just have some fun with the client. So that is subconscious selling, excite the client, listen and laugh. That's the SELL acronym. That's what we need to be working up to. Now, when we're building our actual presentation now, you say, okay, I kind of get it. I know where you're going with this, Jim. Now, what's my actual presentation going to look like? Now, what does that look like when I'm sitting with the client? What does that look like? I'm going to walk you through my personal presentation, the one I use with all my agents and all my coaching students. But before we get to that specific presentation, I do want to point something out. There's this great quote by Charles Magnus who says this: making the simple complicated is commonplace, making the complicated awesomely simple, that's creativity. We are really good at making things super complicated in the real estate industry. We need to simplify, simplify, simplify when it comes to presentation. Making it super easy to understand what you're talking about is our mission in life, right? What you want to do with your presentation style is reduce it to the max. And remember, when you're giving a presentation, text is redundant. What you want to have is the focus on you, not the screen. The screen is a complement to what you're saying. It's a way to keep people visually engaged, because people often learn on two different tracks. They learn visually, they learn auditorily. Some of them learn kinetically too. And what's kinetically? Through touch. That's why I'm bringing things to the table that they can touch and feel, like flyers and postcards and signs and all the fun things that we can bring to the table. I'm bringing a whole mix of styles to the table. But what I'm not doing, and what you've all seen happen, is you'll see some not sophisticated presenter put on the screen a bunch of 18-point text bullet points, and it'll be 10 pages long. No one's going to read it. It's going to bore people, and people are going to internally sigh and say, oh, this is going to be so much work to listen to this presentation. I can't take it. And they will shut down and shut off. Their eyes will glaze over, and they'll start thinking about the ham sandwich they're going to have at lunch. They will stop thinking about you. They'll stop engaging with you. You're going to have to move past it. Now, I'm going to give you one step backward now before we go into the presentation. And that is something that we're using at my company. It's a pre-listing kit. Now, we've all heard of pre-listing kits before, right? So a pre-listing kit is a kit that is mailed or emailed or out to the client before you arrive at the listing. Now, I'm going to suggest to you that all of you should be using a pre-listing kit in your presentation approach. And let me tell you why, because we've done a head-to-head study with our top competitor at my company. And when we started this study, we were finding that when we go to war with our head-to-head competitor, they're on the listing appointment, we're on the listing appointment, we will win about 50% of the time. So it's basically a coin toss. And it probably boiled down to, honestly, personality, because we were kind of neck and neck, right? So we said, how can we change the game and so we can start winning more often? The way we did it was by implementing a pre-listing strategy, a listing kit that went out to the seller before we arrived. And when we did that, bingo, our close rate went to 84%. So I want you to think about yourself. You say, Jim, I want to include my close rate. This simple one technique, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, took us to an 84% close rate. So I'm going to attempt to show you one live here. Let's see if I can make this happen. Nope. Hold on. Let's see if I can pull this off. Okay, can you guys see my digital screen here? Hopefully you guys can still see it. Can you see something that says the Gibson Group? Just give me a thumbs up, Maria, if you can see the Gibson. No?
No.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try to pull this off. Stop sharing that. How about now? Can you see it now? Gibson Group? Okay. Okay, I'm going to show you real quickly what this looks like. So the Gibson Group here has created a pre-listing kit with our marketing team. Talks a little bit about who we are, their group. This is a team. A little bit about what we do. Okay, their plan of action. So you can think of it like a listing presentation in essence, giving back to the community, how they give back, their ratings and reviews on Zillow. This one talks about staging and cleaning and decluttering a house, the power of professional photography, comprehensive marketing strategies, right? Digital marketing, home pricing strategies, and the power of trusted representation, and then a little bit of a bio on each of the group team members. So you can see how beautiful that looks, right? So by the way, I just want to show you just on a technical aspect, what we did there is the marketing team created this as a document. That document was loaded into this website, fliphtml5.com. Take that note, fliphtml5.com. And it creates the magazine effect that you're seeing, but it also creates a URL. And that URL then can be shared and sent as a text or as an email to clients before you arrive at their house. And some people say, Jim, I don't want to spend all the money on printing all these books. Well, you don't have to. You create one book, you load it up into a flip HTML5, and then you're just emailing them now. Okay. And if you want a really fun thing to do with this, build your first pre-listing kit book and then send it to your entire sphere of influence, your database, and say, hey guys, I just created my first pre-listing book. Take a look, tell me what you think, tear it apart, give me some suggestions, some opinions about it. I'd love to hear your feedback. By the way, if you know anyone thinking about selling, feel free to send it on to them. By using that technique, several of my top agents have unlocked 4, 5, 10 listings at a time just using that simple technique. But try using a pre-listing kit. What it does is it's a preemptive strike against your competitors. If they're interviewing anyone else, what happens is they receive your kit and now they're automatically measuring the other person against what you've already delivered to them before you've even arrived at the door, right? You've already set that incredible first impression. That's why we win so often. So let's talk about your actual presentation for a few minutes. Your actual presentation is absolutely key. But when you're talking about your presentation, some people get way in the weeds with their presentation. They don't know what they should include in a presentation. So I had one guy come to one of my seminars and he showed me his presentation was 105 pages. I said, Bob, how long does it take you to get through that bad boy? And he said, it takes me about 3 hours if I go really fast. I said, oh my gosh, wow, that's incredible. And I was thinking to myself, there's no way I would ever sit through that thing. And I'm amazed that anybody would ever sit through that. We have about 22 minutes max for a listing presentation. Now that doesn't include a pricing conversation and the actual listing paperwork. But in terms of you sitting down and just talking to people, that's the length of most sitcoms in America with bathroom breaks taken out. Okay, so that's probably about how long you have in order to get through that listing presentation effectively. What does that translate into in terms of like a PowerPoint presentation? That's 15 to 20 pages, maybe, could be 10 to 15 pages, depending on how fast you talk. What are you going to be talking about? I'm going to give you 3 key things that every presentation should cover, and it's super simple. And I introduced this as something I call the three-legged table, by the way. So that what I call the 3 Ps, it's price, it's product, and it's promotion. And the way I explain this to sellers is, hey, I say, you know what? Selling a house is kind of like a three-legged table. There's 3 key elements I call the 3 Ps. There's price, there's product, and there's promotion. And the ability of your house to sell kind of rests on those 3 legs. If one of them is kind of out of alignment, like this light that fell over, it will fall over, right? So we got to be really careful that we get these things aligned together so we have a successful sale and you're able to move on. And that's what every great presentation really drives towards, is that covering those 3 Ps in a really effective way that is engaging for the client. So I'm going to show you a presentation here, and you guys are going to get a copy of it if you want to model it. So we call this our selling your home, the 3 keys, right? And again, we're introducing it by just saying, hey, can I take just a minute, show you kind of how I work with sellers and what it takes to really get your home sold in today's market. Everybody will say yes to it. And then I'm going to say, so, and then I'm going to get into the 3 keys of selling. I'm going to say, so, there are really 3 keys to selling a home. And, it's kind of like that three-legged table. I walk them through that conversation. Now I'm going to interact with them. Now, I'm going to give you a pro tip here. You want to engage on every page. This is not a monologue, right? This is a dialogue of communication. So I want to try to bring them in to every page with a question, with a story, with an anecdote that I can talk about. So I'll give you an example. In this case, I might say, 3 Ps, price, product, promotion. You probably have noticed that one of your neighbors down the road over here has been on the market about 4 months, hasn't sold. Have you noticed that listing? And they're going to say, yeah, I have noticed that. I'm going to say, why do you think that house listing hasn't sold? And they're going to give you their opinion. So can I tell you why I think it hasn't sold? And I'll say, sure. So I'll say, well, I pulled it up in MLS this morning and I noticed a few things with the marketing that I don't think was quite dialed in. So that's the promotion side. I noticed a couple of things with the price where I think they may be misaligned on price. And on the promotion side, I don't know that it's being promoted quite right. So that's what's happening. They're kind of missing the boat on the 3 Ps there. At least one of those things is out of alignment. Does that make sense? Now I'm related to a real story in their neighborhood, right? If you guys haven't read the book, what's the book's name? It's Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, FBI hostage negotiator. He talks about something called an anchor point. And that's what we're doing right now. I'm creating an anchor point, which is a property that has not sold in their neighborhood and it's not selling for a reason. And we don't want to do that. We want to do the reverse of what those people are doing, right? So then I'm going to say, obviously the first thing we talk about is always price. Price is the ultimate motivator, and it's the #1 marketing tool that we have. Write that sentence down. Price is the #1 marketing tool that we have, right? So when we look at price, what we have to think about is that buyers generally search for about 10 weeks. And during that time, they look at about 10 homes. Now, what's interesting about that is we just got a new study out that shows that of the homes they look at, 3 of them they're looking at virtually, and they count that as a showing in their mind. So they think that just because they walk through a house virtually, that's like a showing to them today, which is really interesting. But 10 weeks, 10 showings generally is what we're looking at. So, but there is a big difference when we're talking about pricing between listing a house and selling a house, because that's a big decision point we have to make. Do we just want to list it or do we want to sell it? Because there's people out in this marketplace that are listing houses but not selling them. The people that are selling are being really focused on getting that price dialed in, getting it right out of the gate. So what I do with my clients is I really help them analyze the market and then pick a price that really will attract the maximum number of buyers and ideally generates multiple offers, right? We really have 3 choices when it comes to pricing. We can do what we call comp-based pricing. That's what everybody does, right? Comp-based pricing is, I'm going to look at all the comparable sales in the neighborhood and we're going to price it kind of in that line. Then there's what you might call 1 in a million pricing. Like your other neighbor over here has done that. He's been on the market 6 months and he's looking for that 1 in a million buyer. It's probably never going to happen, right? And then you got what we call frenzy-based pricing. Now, frenzy-based pricing is where you see sellers that are getting multiple offers that are selling in a day or 2 days. A lot of them are using the frenzy-based pricing strategy. What that means is that we come in a little bit below comp-based pricing, not a lot, just a little. So it looks like, and it is, the most attractive value in the marketplace. That way, everybody that turns their heads and looks at it says, I gotta go see that property right away. That's where we can create a lot of energy, a lot of synergy, a lot of action, and we get those multiple offers that can often take us above comp-based pricing. I can show you a couple examples of that in your local neighborhood. And then you show that off and say, look at this property. It's listed, sold in 1 day for multiple offers, but they priced it really aggressively. You show them, you just don't tell them, you show them what's going on, right? And this leads me into this conversation about really getting into market activity. So I'll say at this point, you know what a lot of people don't understand is something I call the buyer backlog. Now, within any market, there's a group of buyers that are just waiting for the next listing to hit the market, right? So in our price point, that could be 200, 300, 400 buyers. There's a lot of buyers in the market right now. And so what those buyers are just waiting for is the next listing to hit the market. And when they do, they kind of all collectively turn and look at your listing at the same time. Because what's happened over the last 10 years is that basically virtually every single buyer in the market signed up for a portal that will give them an alert, an email or a text, and it'll say a new listing hit the market that matches your criteria. So when your listing hits the market, within 24 hours, you might have 200, 300, 400 buyers looking at your home at the same time. So that's why the homes that do sell super fast, usually within the first 2 weeks. The homes that don't sell and linger, they can take a month, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and generally they're chasing the price down because we only have one shot at that first impression. If everybody turns and looks at your listing at the same time and they collectively decide it's overpriced, guess what? Trying to bring them back to the table is really hard. We don't get a second bite at the apple. So really pricing right is so important. In the old days, we would say, let's just start high and work our way down. That strategy just doesn't work anymore. What happens is now I'm having to buy buyers back, and it's really expensive to buy those buyers back, okay? So that's why it's so important that we get that price really set up right in the beginning. So you're noticing I'm taking a long time on price because I will go drive this home. So at this point, I may go back and kind of circle back to those anchor points and say, and let's look at your neighborhood a little bit. Let's look at your peer group and what's happening with your peer group. By the way, using that term, peer group, super important, what you're going to reflect back on when you have the property listed. So you say, well, when we go to market, here's what our competitors will look like. We got about 5 listings in the neighborhood. Here's where they're at. You know, competitively, we want to make sure that we are as good, or if we want to use the frenzy strategy, a little bit better, so we attract the maximum number of buyers, of course. Now, the other thing to think about when we talk about price is the fact that we want to use what I call mobile pricing strategy, okay? Now, what's a mobile pricing strategy? And then I'm going to get into, again, pulling them back into conversation. I'm going to say, so you guys have looked for homes. I'm sure you're looking for a home now because you're going to be selling. What platforms are you on? And they'll say, well, I'm on Realtor.com, I'm on Zillow, on your website. I'll say, okay. So tell me this, when you're on these platforms, are you typing in a price or are you just using the little scrolling window, the little pointer that kind of guides you to the price, right? Most people are using little windows and little scroll things. They're just going, okay, boop, I'm going to use that price, that preset price target, right? That's the way 95% of buyers do that today. Very few buyers are going to be typing in a price, right? And because of that, we have to use mobile pricing strategies and what I call search engine pricing strategies. Let me give you an example. So here's my example. So for instance, let's say that you have a buyer that would be looking between 600,000 and 650 in your market. But we, because of the comps, price your property at 652 because that's what it comps at, or 655 or 653. That buyer that's looking between 600 and 650 would never see your home. They just wouldn't. There's a misconception about buyers seeing the whole market. They don't see the whole market. They only see what they're searching for. So that's a strategy issue right there. So we might say if we're close to a major price point like 650, for instance, we would maybe want to say, hey, let's go at 650 even, because people looking between 600 and 650 will see it, but also people looking between 650 and 700,000 will see it. We'll instantly double our buyer pool. When you have that conversation with people, people get it instantaneously, and they will be like, that makes a ton of sense. You know what? I think you're right. The other thing is we never price with nines. There is a terrible habit still in our industry today where people are like, I'm going to price the property at, and here's another example. I'm going to price it at $649,999 because I think that's like a supermarket. I'm going to do supermarket pricing, and that's what I'm going to do because I think psychologically it's better for buyers. Terrible strategy, because if you went $1 more to 650, you're doubling your buyer pool instantaneously. Does that make sense? So now I'm educating. They're not going to hear this from any other realtor. They're going to be like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. This gal really knows what she's talking about. If you want to do this really powerfully, you could bring up a search in realtor.com or your website and show them the pricing patterns and how it looks in the market. Okay. Now, the other thing we've got to get into though is product, right? The actual product, what the house looks like, how it's going to stack up. So what I'm going to talk about here is, the power of staging. 77% of buyers agents say staging a home made it easier for buyers to visualize themselves living in the house. And so I'm going to get into this. I'm going to say, hey, of course, we all keep our homes clean, even if they don't. But when you put your home on the market, it becomes really a product. And it's kind of like selling a car. When we sell a car, no matter how clean we keep it, what do? We go clean it. We go deep cleaning it, right? So I always recommend to every client I have that we maybe have even a professional come in and deep clean it, or maybe we can deep clean it. But then we also use something I call the CDS method. The CDS method is we clean, we declutter, and we stage. We clean, we declutter, we stage. So cleaning's obvious. We're going to go from the ceilings all the way down to the floors. So we're going to do everything in between. It's going to be deep. Maybe spend a whole weekend on it, get it looking as good as it's ever looked. And that could be including the outside too, which we'll talk about in a minute. But so the cleaning is first. Decluttering means this. It means that I'm going to remove anything from the house that's going to take people out of the position of building an emotional bond with the house. And here's what I mean by that. As people are walking through the house, if they see your personal family photos on the wall, and even me, who's shown thousands of homes, I cannot help but stop and look at people's personal photography. I just can't help it. I look at it because I was like, oh, that's a beautiful photo. Look at that little girl. What a beautiful wedding shot. We all do it when we're walking through a house. When you do that, they stop looking at the house and they start looking at your family photos. We can't have them do that. We got to have them centered on the house, right? All those photos have to come down. Any kind of personal art that's really unique has to come down. Any collectible collections have to come down. You want them to get emotionally attached to the house, not your collections, not your personal photography. You want to get them emotionally vested, right? See themselves living in the home with their own art on the walls, with their own family photos on the walls. So that's decluttering. And then third is staging. So staging just means every room tells a story. There's a natural flow from the house. And I can give you some tips on the ways that we can do that. Now, here's something interesting. New study just came out that shows that way over 45% of buyers are now influenced, over 45% are now influenced by what they see on television. A lot of people are watching a lot of HGTV television programs and other ones where they show people looking at homes and remodeling homes. And people now have an expectation when they walk into our house that it's going to look like a house on TV. So we have to even go higher to make it look good and really measure up, okay? So I'm sure that when you have been looking at homes yourself, you've had a situation where you've seen something, you're like, that's interesting. What did that look like for you guys? Try to get into conversation about that. And they'll say, oh yeah, I walked into a house and I had this in there, that in there. Yeah, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Try to get into conversation. Then we're going to talk about a little bit about curb appeal. So I'm going to say, hey, when a buyer pulls up to the outside of the home, here's what's going to happen. They can make a snap decision about whether they like it or not. I had an unterrible experience several times where I pulled up to a house to show it, and the buyers would look at the outside and they say, like, nope, we don't want to get out of the car. Then I have to go knock on the client's door and say, I'm sorry, the buyers have decided the neighborhood's not right for them, and we leave. We never want to have a buyer do that with your house. So curb appeal, believe it or not, can actually increase your value by 4 to 5%. Now, sometimes what happens when we're living in a house is we stop seeing things. If you want me to, we can both walk out to the curb and look back at the house, and I can give you a list of things that I can really think will help the house really have better curb appeal if you want me to. Or maybe you've already identified some things that you want to change before you can put it on the market. Have you given it some thought? Get into that curb appeal conversation and we walk down that process, that road. Then the other thing we're going to talk about is, when we list your house, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to get a lot of showings, or not. Now, if we get a lot of showings, what that's going to indicate is that the price is right and we're doing things right. So it's great news. But if we get a lot of showings but no offers, what that can indicate is that people are okay with the price, but the product, the house itself, something's stopping them from actually going forward. So what we need to do is make sure that the condition is as good as your competitors in the market, right? You got to look at that. I'm going to give you a full detailed printout with lots of photos of all of our competitors. We want to look as good or better than all those competitors in the market. So make it a competition amongst those competitors. Bring those pictures out. Look at those listings together. Say, hey, that one looks pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, see? And then they'll get a little bit inspired. Instead of you just telling them, you're showing them what the competitors are looking at. That's why you want to have that peer group set up and really talk about that peer group that they're competing with, which makes it such a big difference. Now we're going to get into promotion. And this is where we're going to step up and show how we're different than other competitors in the market. So only 35% of agents use professional photography, which is crazy, but that's still true today. So I'm going to say, once we get that price in line, that product, we get that all dialed in. Now the next step is to come in and have professional photography. Now I work with an amazing photographer. I brought along some examples of what he's done. This is powerful, visually exciting the client. And he's going to make your house look like $1 million. It's going to look amazing. But here's what I do. I work with you. And so he's going to take well over 100 photos, but we want the photos to really tell a story about the house. He's going to work, outside in and go through all the way through the house. But we're going to decide together which of those photos we're going to use to market your property. So we'll have a little meeting about that. I'll email them all over to you. We'll rate them one by one. We may not agree all the time, but we're going to probably come to an agreement. And I want you to tell me, though, before we have him come out, what has been your favorite, what I would call focus feature? Like, you looked at a lot of houses before you bought this one. What's the one feature that really stood out to you that really was like, wow, that's cool? Is there something about the house? Get into that conversation. Make sure your photographer really captures those images. Super powerful. Also, make sure you're getting dusk shots, dawn shots are super powerful. Those are really going to make the house shine. The other thing is the internet, obviously, is a big deal. So 95% of buyers shop on the internet for the primary source of information. So I'm going to be adding some things that a lot of agents don't think about. I'm going to be adding shots of the neighborhood. Of the 13 reasons why someone buys a specific home, 9 of them are related to the neighborhood. Isn't that amazing? 9 are related to the neighborhood. So with that, I want to make sure I'm highlighting the neighborhood, because you can have the best home, but the neighborhood could be the issue, right? Flip side, you could have a home that's maybe not quite as good as other homes, but the neighborhood's amazing and people will love it. So I'm going to highlight the neighborhood. I'm also going to highlight the lifestyle that someone would enjoy if they purchased your home. Not just the neighborhood, but how close shopping is, how close the schools are, how close medical facilities are. I'm going to really highlight the whole living experience with people. That will get people excited about what they're doing there. And here's a statistic that'll blow your mind. Did you know that 50% of all online leads in real estate are not followed up on? 50%. I pride myself on following up on leads rapidly and making sure that we chase down every single lead that comes in on your house. Here's another crazy stat that'll blow your mind. Only 9% of realtors today use social media to market their listings. I'm a huge believer in social media. Let me show you some of the work I've done on social media to promote my listings. I think you'll be absolutely impressed. Again, I'm going to be showing them some of the work I'm doing, how I'm promoting their listings on all kinds of different channels. And then, the internet is one thing, but here's something that's really powerful too, is that 92% of recent buyers used a realtor as an information search in their home, second only to the internet. So number one, the internet's the number one information resource, but number two is realtors. So what do I do in terms of that? I'm going to be out there marketing your house, directly to realtors in the market. I've created amazing relationships with some of the best realtors in this valley or in this market. So I've created a list, a master list of the top 10% of the agent pool, people that are selling 90% of the real estate, and I market the heck out of your house to those folks so they know and it's top of mind for them. Okay. So I'm gonna go dive deep into that. Then I'm going to transition over to closing the transaction. You know, the rate of failed home purchases throughout the 100 largest metro areas in the US nearly doubled over the past 2 years as the market's going into kind of a start of a transition here in our market. So for me, I really pride myself on getting transactions to closing. Now, if you have a stat behind this, this is super powerful. If you could say, I close 95% of listings I put into escrow, point that out. I close 97% of the deals I put into escrow, point that out. That will be a powerful stat that will show them that you are somebody who gets the job done, right? And then point out that, you know, what it takes to get that job done is that there's probably on average in most transactions, 12 to 15 different people. So what I do is I'm constantly making sure your file's on the top of those people's desks, and I'm constantly following up with my team to make sure we're moving the ball forward, we're getting you close to the finish line. And I'm always going to stay in rapid communication with you. So if we do have any bumps along the road, we're going to be the first to know it. We're going to be able to address those issues and get your transaction closed. So I rush that. And of course, we're not interacting like a regular conversation, but that's how our presentation kind of flows. And we just want to engage people and have kind of a natural conversation. This is before we've actually started talking about pricing, right? And getting into like a CMA. Now, before we wrap up, there's a couple of things I want to get into that will be powerful for you in the field too, which is commission conversations, right? A lot of discounters in the marketplace today. A lot of people that are, you know, they're desperate, and desperation creates a lot of people out there discounting their fees and doing all kinds of crazy things to get listings. So how do you handle the commission conversation? I'm gonna give you a couple techniques that some of my top agents use. One is you say, hey, I'm gonna give you my example. I'm not advocating for this, but 3%, I charge 3% of my listing services. We just need to decide what we offer the buyer's agent. And that's how a lot of conversations with some of my top agents work. And that's a great way to kind of introduce the commission conversation. Another one is, hey, I charge between one of my top agents, Terry Rasmussen, top 1% in the nation, one of my coaching clients. He says, I charge between 5 and 7%. Now, I'm not advocating the specific percentages for your company. I'm just saying what we're talking about. He says between 5 and 7%, and you get to decide. Okay. Now, of course, his minimum matches our company minimum. And he'll say, so if we go 5%, I'm splitting that with the buyer's agent. They're getting 2.5, we're getting 2.5. If we do 6, we're splitting it. We do 7, we're splitting it. Now, why would you go 6 or 7? The reason is I'm incentivizing that buyer's agent to show your home. If they have 10 homes to show, and 9 of them are paying 2% or 2.5%, and one's paying 3% or 3.5%, which house do you think is going to be shown first? Now, yes, we should always show every home, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of people will be motivated by those percentages. But you're in charge. Where do you think 90% of those people go when you give them that 5 to 7% spread? 90% of them go right to 6%. They want to be right in the middle of that spread. So those are two tactics that have worked really well. But what happens when you get this comment? Somebody says, hey, another office offered to sell the home for bingo, whatever number. Hey, I'm curious, did you ask them to lower their commission, or did they offer to lower it? Here's my concern about that. I'd be concerned a little bit about their negotiation skills. If they give away their money so easily, how hard will they negotiate to protect your equity? The lowest bidder is usually that way for a reason, and it's not their negotiation skills, right? Hey, can I show you how I'll net you top dollar and how my negotiation skills have helped other sellers sell for top dollar? So that's one approach. Another one could be, hey, my first question is, do you want to trust the lowest bidder with the largest asset you probably own? By the way, this is my favorite one, because I can definitely find you someone that will even do it cheaper than that. Power statement. Because I can definitely find you someone that will do it cheaper than that. The question you have to ask yourself is, why would these companies discount their fees? And if they're so willing to work for a discount, how fast will they be on folding into your price when talking to a buyer or another agent? So those are some really powerful ways to approach that. Now we got to wrap it up, guys. I got a lot more, but time is of the essence here. But I do want to give you a couple of just things to think about if you're looking for a real estate coach. Just a 1-minute plug for my real estate coaching company. It's called eReal Estate Coach. You can find it online at erealestatecoach.com. So we have a lot of powerful tools that we put together. First 14 days is absolutely free. And what it includes in there, we give you 20 weeks of kind of a boot camp for lead generation, 20 solid weeks. We give you hundreds of downloads, and we give you 3 live coaching sessions every single week. and lots of systems, lots of checklists to plug into it as well. Again, the first 14 days is free. We also have some one-on-one coaching if you want to take a look at that. Guys, hopefully I gave you a little bit of things to think about today as you kind of been running through here kind of rapidly. Again, I'm going to give Maria all of my slides so she can look at them as well. And I'm going to stay on here for a few minutes if anybody has any questions they want to ask me directly.
Thank you very much, Jim. So if anyone has a question, please go ahead. And then, yeah, so Jim will have a few minutes just to answer the questions. And as a friendly reminder, this webinar will count for the PDP points. So if anyone is interested to get it, please add your full name, the name of the board that you are in, and also your ID CREA number. Thank you very much.
High expectations. Hi, I just had a question here.
Sure.
So how do you approach someone that like a seller that has high expectations
For their price.
for the price?
So I think you have to, if they come in and they're saying, I got this number in mind, but the market's only supporting this number. I think what you have to do, first of all, just to give you an example, the way I approach it, I know some agents do this differently, but I tend to never ask them for their price. Now, sometimes they'll volunteer it, but what happens psychologically is people, when you say, what do you think the house will sell for? They will naturally go to a high price because they think they're supposed to. It's a negotiation with you. So what happens is they'll peg a price here, and then they'll feel like they have to defend it when you're coming in here with an actual CMA and actually hard data. And pretty soon they don't want to lose space to you. And so they'll defend it anymore and they'll entrench even further. And it gets to be this weird position where they feel like they've got to defend a price that's unreasonable. So my first suggestion is never ask the seller what they think it's worth, because you're going to go down a road that you don't want to go down there. If they announce it and they say, here's what I think the home is worth, I'll say, totally hear what you're saying. And I would love to get you that much money, or I'd love to get you actually more than that, honestly. And that's always my goal, is to get top dollar for my clients. But what I like to do is share with you what's actually happening in the marketplace, because we got to work with what's here, and buyers are going to be seeing all your peer group. And what your peer group is like 4, 5, 10 other homes that they're going to look at the same time they're looking at your house. And people always tend to go with the best value, kind of like probably when you bought the house, you probably went with the best value you could find in the market. So let me just show you what's going on with the peer group, and then you can make your own decision. I'm not here to sell you. I'm just here to present the information. So you're never forcing it down their throat, but at the end of the day, you'll have to make a decision whether you want to take the listing or not, right? But for me, it's always coming back to that peer group. But here's what you do with the peer group. And when you bring this out, so you're going to show them what they're competing with, but in a big red pen, I'm going to write down the market time for those listings. I'm going to say, okay, this person's on the market for $1.2 million. They've been on the market 220 days. They've reduced the price 3 times. This person is on the market for $1 million. So reduce the price 3 times. They're at, now at 999,000, whatever it is. And you show them that these people are not being successful with their strategy. And then you show them what is successful, where those people have had smaller prices, but shorter market times, and maybe times got bid up above list price. That's when you put it in black and white, will often help. Hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
That. Anybody else have a question? I'm here to answer.
Yeah, if no one else, if I may, a quick question.
Sure.
I'm a fairly new broker, was part-time, and now as of this year, full-time. And I was just wondering, when it comes to that booklet that you advise to send out to the clients before having the meeting, what would you suggest putting in that booklet for a fairly new broker?
Well, you want to lean on, you got a great company. You got Sutton, which was one of the #1 companies in Canada. So you want to lean on Sutton's performance, not your own, because you don't have a lot of performance, right?
Exactly. So
what I would do is I would look at your overall performance of the entire group, the franchise, and then look at your local performance as well, and just really lean on that. Lean on the marketing that they're providing, their website, their technology, their support systems, all the things that they have, and just incorporate that all throughout your presentation. But often we forget that as an individual, we'll call it solo agent, that we always have a team around us. We just don't quite realize it, right? So we have, your principal broker, your supervising broker, that's a team member for you, right? You could put them on your booklet, and that'd be okay. And you could say, this is my supervising broker. They give me a lot of support. You could say your escrow officer, if they're okay with it, put them in your booklet that you use often, not every time. Your lender that maybe you're using. So you could build it out and make yourself look bigger than what you are. And that's okay. You're being honest, you're being transparent about it, but that's what I would do.
very cool. Okay, thank you.
Question?
You bet.
Yeah, sorry, question. If you are new in, for example, such area, and you want and there's one or two very well known brokers in this area, and you are new or just started working, so how do you you're gonna convince the seller to hire you to sell his house compared to the well-known brokers?
So well, it depends. I'm gonna give you two answers. One, if those brokers work in your office, which sometimes they do, if they work in your office, the best strategy, in my opinion, is to partner with them. So you go out and lead generate, you find a lead, and then you tell the seller, hey, I'm going to bring in one of my friends at the office who's a real expert, and I'd love to have him co-list the property with me. Why would I do that? Why would I get about half my fee? Is because, number one, I'm going to be a guaranteed listing because they're going to come in and close it. I'm not going to lose it. Second is I'm going to gain some experience under my belt where when that deal closes, now I've got a deal closed that shows up under my radar, and I can say, I'm going to take credit for it. I close this transaction. So if they're in your office, don't be afraid of just bringing them into the table. You know, that's number one. Number two, if they're not in your office and you're competing with them and you're a newer agent, then I would again look at saying, is there somebody I could partner with that has more experience than me, and or bringing to the table, you know, I just a classic example myself. I started at the age of 19 and I looked young for 19. And so when I went out on the, you know, started taking listings at 20 and became top 1% at the age of 20, of course, when I went out there was more experienced people, there was more successful people. But the way I won is I would simply say to them, hey, listen, I'm new to the business, but I'm going to tell you something. Here's my advantage to you, is that you are my number one priority. I don't have 50 other listings. I've got your listing, and I'm going to go all the way on it. I'm going to work nonstop till it's sold. And I'm going to do my absolute best to stay, you know, super communicative with you and really give you everything I possibly do. And people, believe it or not, will appreciate your honesty and your transparency. And they will tend to gravitate towards you because they'll look at you, especially for me when I was 19, they'll look at you and say, almost like like a grandparent, like, I'm going to adopt this kid. I want this kid to succeed. I want them to win, right? And that's what happened, right? So don't be afraid to be transparent about it. Also partner with other agents.
Thanks.
You bet.
All right. Well, it seems like the time is over. I will send the information and presentation for all these people who sent. Jim, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. The presentation was very helpful. And then we really appreciate it to having you today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Jim.